Wow. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt. But still, like dust, I rise. I mean, come on, talk about an opener.
Right. Powerful stuff.
Yeah, and that's how Melanie Brown starts her memoir. Brutally honest.
Just hits you right away.
It does, and it really sets the stage for this amazing story of resilience that we're going to dig into today.
Definitely foreshadowing.
So for this deep dive, we are focusing on Brutally Honest by Melanie Brown.
Yeah, it's amazing how she kind of spans that whole range from,
Mhm.
the height of global fame to these very, very personal, intimate struggles.
She really does. And it's a big book. She covers a lot, but we're going to kind of concentrate on some of the things that really jumped out at us.
Yeah.
And the thought-provoking stuff.
The core.
Yeah, exactly. And the stuff that we feel is going to be the most revealing for all of you listeners.
I think a good place to start is with this idea of silence.
Mhm.
Because she talks about, a decade of silence.
Yeah.
She intentionally didn't speak for 10 years.
A decade.
Yeah, and she talks about how this was primarily as a way to try to protect her 3 daughters
Oh, wow.
from the complexities and the potential harm of what was happening in her marriage.
So basically 10 years of keeping it all in to protect your kids.
Exactly, and it's such a heavy thing to carry, this self-imposed silence.
Yeah.
But she eventually reached this point where she had to publicly declare in front of a judge, no less, her need for legal safeguarding
Wow.
from her then husband.
So she hit a breaking point.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so what do you think is most revealing about that initial 10 years of silence? Because it's a huge chunk of time.
It is, and I think what's really interesting there is the contrast between how she presented externally and what was actually happening internally for her.
Yeah.
So, to the public, she's Mel B, right?
Yeah.
Vibrant, energetic, seemingly fearless, scary spice.
Yeah, exactly.
But then she talks about feeling internally lost, really lost and existing behind a wall that not only separated her from her loved ones, but also from herself.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And I think this is something that you see a lot with fame,
Totally.
where there's this very carefully constructed external image
Yeah.
that, people present to the world.
Yeah.
And it can end up being this gilded cage
Absolutely.
that prevents people from expressing vulnerability and asking for help.
Right. And so even though she was this, powerful, scary spice figure, she was feeling so trapped and isolated behind that wall. And then, what really surprised me is where she found this unexpected strength when she eventually did go public.
Oh, yeah.
She talks about how tons of women from all walks of life reached out to her.
Yeah.
Celebrities, nurses, receptionists, bankers, teachers, all these different women sharing their own personal stories.
Yeah.
And she was like, whoa, this is everywhere.
It is. And I think that's a huge takeaway because even though, they had these vastly different lives.
Yeah, totally.
They were all connected by this shared experience.
Yeah, and the power of hearing those stories helped her through.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Gave her strength in a time when she really needed it.
Okay, so let's move into her internal struggles because she talks about feeling very trapped by this celebrity image that she had, in part created for herself. She felt almost suffocated by this perception of her as scary spice.
Yeah, she makes this really interesting point that it was the public perception of her as this strong, outspoken figure actually became a form of confinement. Yeah, and so this feeling of being so restricted, of not being able to be her true self, led her to a really dark place.
Yeah.
It was that same desperate place that she had known as a teenager.
Oh, no.
And so she talks about how she descended into substance use as a way to try to cope with this huge conflict that she was feeling inside.
Oh, that's so sad. It's the image that brought her fame
Right.
was also a huge part of what made her so unhappy.
Exactly.
And then she talks about the overdose in her Kensington bathroom. And that was just I had to put the book down for a second.
It's intense.
It is almost 200 pills.
It's a lot.
It's crazy. What does that moment reveal about how she was feeling?
I mean, it was obviously a moment of just utter despair.
Yeah.
But what I think is so important is that immediately after she felt this huge wave of regret. The second those pills went down,
Yeah.
she knew she didn't want to die.
Wow.
And she talks about looking at herself in the mirror and just seeing Melanie, a woman, a mother.
That's her core self came back.
Yeah. And that basic instinct to live, to be there for her kids, that came flooding back.
Wow. That's so powerful.
It is, right?
And even as she was time was distorted and she was in this crazy state, she had these like little thoughts going through her mind.
Yeah.
Like she remembers the Grazia cover shoot.
Yeah.
She remembers like someone from her dance school in Leeds, but she couldn't remember their name.
Yeah.
It's like these weird human moments.
It is. It's like amidst this life or death situation, she's still having these like really ordinary thoughts.
Yeah.
And I think it shows that even in these like really intense situations, our connections to the world, these basic memories, they stay with us.
Yeah, and it's like a reminder that a part of her wanted to live.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay, so then she makes this conscious decision to like speak out and tell it like it is.
Yeah.
Even though she knows it's going to be super difficult and super messy.
Oh, yeah. Especially, everything that happened with the court case.
Yeah, like why do you think she did that?
I think there's a couple things going on. One is that she connects her personal experiences to these much wider societal issues.
Okay.
She mentions statistics from Women's Aid that show a really strong link between being in abusive relationships and the likelihood of developing problems with substance abuse.
Oh, wow.
And she notes that women in those situations are like 15 times more likely to abuse alcohol.
Whoa.
And 9 times more likely to abuse drugs.
Wow.
And she's like, well, yeah, I mean, this is what I lived through.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
It makes sense. Yeah, she's very open about her own substance use. She talks about using cocaine back in the UK and then drinking and drugs in LA. And she ties it directly to this feeling of being ugly, unwanted, and humiliated.
It's so heartbreaking.
Yeah.
To realize how people in these really damaging situations turn to substances to try and numb the pain.
Yeah. It makes sense, though.
It does make sense, but it doesn't make it any less tragic.
No. Yeah. And so she develops this technique of blocking, which is basically like shutting down any difficult thoughts or overwhelming emotions or scary fears.
Right.
Like almost like an instinctive shield to protect yourself.
Yeah.
And she also found like this weird kind of safe space in her work on the X Factor.
It's interesting, isn't it, that work became this kind of like refuge for her?
Yeah.
Because it gave her this sense of control.
Yeah.
Like in a situation where she felt like she had no control.
Yeah,
It
totally.
was this structure, this like predictable environment where she could focus on something outside of the chaos that was happening at home.
Yeah, and it was a place where her husband couldn't like directly influence her.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so then there's this looming fear surrounding her ex-husband's sex tape library, as she calls it.
Oh, God.
And she's just terrified that any one of these tapes could be leaked.
Yeah.
And it's like this constant threat over her head.
Oh, absolutely. And it just highlights the way that, abusers can use technology and personal information to manipulate their victims.
Totally. And it was obviously a huge part of why she was so afraid to speak out for so long.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? So then she talks about this crazy situation where she had to go back to America's Got Talent right after being at her father's deathbed.
Oh, my God.
Like, imagine that.
I can't even imagine.
And she's so used to being treated like Scary Spice, like with the expectation of energy and jokes. And suddenly people are like, oh, you poor thing.
Right.
And she hated it.
Yeah.
And she's like, I just want to work.
She didn't want the pity party?
No. And she was like, I'm fine. I want to work. And then Simon Cowell just like cracks a joke. She's like, that's exactly what I needed.
Yeah. It's like sometimes what you need in those moments is normalcy, not sympathy.
Yes, exactly. And it's so true because sometimes people don't know what to say.
Right.
But if you can just be normal, that's so much better.
Totally.
Yeah. Okay, so now let's get into like the nitty-gritty of her relationship struggles. And some of the like tactics that her ex-husband used to like control her and undermine her relationships with other people.
Yeah.
So for example, he would say things like, you're an embarrassment to your daughter.
Oh, my God.
And just like planting these seeds of doubt
Yeah.
and making her feel really isolated.
It's like attacking her at her most vulnerable point, right?
Exactly.
Her role as a mother.
Yeah, and he would delete messages from her phone and like really try to cut her off from her support system.
That's classic isolation tactics.
It is, yeah. And she talks about feeling like she was in this toxic game of control.
It's like her whole life was being manipulated.
It was. And she even questions if what she was experiencing was gaslighting.
Oh, wow.
Like this psychological manipulation that makes you question your own sanity.
Yeah, and that can have really, really serious consequences.
It can. And so during this time, she starts using these coping mechanisms.
Okay.
She talks about laughing instead of crying.
Wow.
And she secretly kept a diary as like a record of her own experiences. And she even started to get paranoid about her food.
What?
Yeah, like wondering if he was poisoning her.
Oh my gosh.
I know, it's intense, right?
Yeah.
And it just shows like the level of fear and distrust that she was living with.
Absolutely. It's like this constant state of hypervigilance
Yeah.
where you can't even trust the food you're eating.
It's crazy. Okay, so then there's the impact on her family, which is really heartbreaking to read about.
Yep.
And she talks about how, initially she was keeping silent to protect her kids,
Right.
but then she realized how much they were actually being affected by everything.
Yeah.
Like by the toxic environment.
It's a hard realization.
It is. And her relationship with her parents was also really damaged during this time.
Yeah.
She talks about how her lawyers basically kept her parents out of her life.
Oh.
And they never even got to meet her youngest daughter, Madison.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and they only saw Angel and Phoenix like a couple of times when they were little.
That's so sad.
It is. And she talks about wanting her parents to see her success on the X Factor.
Oh.
And to see her kids in magazines, like almost to prove to them that she was still the same Melanie.
Yeah.
And then there's this recurring line from her father where he tells her, Melanie, don't forget your roots.
Oh, yeah.
And it becomes this really poignant kind of reminder because she was so caught up in this world of fame and fortune.
Yeah, like she was living in this like over-the-top Coldwater Canyon home.
Yeah, but it was like she had lost herself.
Yeah, like material success can't replace your roots, your family, your history.
Exactly. And then she gets this news that her father is dying, and it's like right in the middle of all this craziness.
Oh, man.
She talks about the moment when her sister Danielle calls the X Factor production office.
Yeah.
And it's just like this shock on top of everything else.
Yeah, like life doesn't wait for your personal crises to be over.
No, it doesn't. Okay, so then there's this whole story about the overdose attempt and her friend finding her. It's really intense. Like her friend finds her in this like super vulnerable state. And she's saying these like disjointed things about taking an overdose.
It's scary.
It is. And her friend is like, I gotta get her help, but I can't let her husband know.
Oh, wow.
And then she describes her husband like spooning her in bed.
What?
Yeah, like as if everything's normal.
My gosh.
I know, it's super creepy.
Yeah.
And then they have to get her to the hospital and like avoid the paparazzi.
It's just chaos on top of chaos.
It is, yeah. And then she calls Simon Cowell from the hospital.
Yeah.
And he's like, just take all the time you need. And it's like this weird moment of support.
Yeah, it's like an unexpected source of comfort in this crazy situation.
Yeah, and then the nurses can't even find a vein for the IV.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, because her veins were so messed up.
Wow.
And then she has this moment where she's like, I'm not going to be silent anymore.
It's like a turning point.
It is, yeah.
Like this whole physical crisis kind of like forced her to confront what was happening.
Yeah, exactly. And so then she goes to stay at a friend's house, and it's like this total contrast to her own chaotic life.
Yep.
She talks about the quiet domesticity of her friend's house and like little things like the notes on the fridge. And she's like, I don't even have that in my life.
Right.
But then she's still getting all these messages from her husband. Like even in this safe space, he's still trying to control her.
It's like it's so hard to escape.
It is. And she has this great metaphor where she compares the abuse to like a drop of black dye in water.
Oh, yeah.
That slowly colors the whole glass.
It's such a good image.
It is.
Like how it just seeps into everything.
Yeah. And then she talks about how they were living on separate floors in their house to try and like shield the kids from the arguments.
That's so sad.
It is. And then their therapist notices that she only interacts with her husband in two ways.
Which are?
Either complete silence or like aggressive challenge.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like there's no middle ground.
It's not a healthy dynamic.
It's not. Okay, so then she has this really intense conversation with her daughter Phoenix.
Yeah.
In the hospital room after the overdose. And she's like, I know you've seen so much desperation and misery.
Oh, my God.
And she promises her daughter that she's going to make it right.
Oh, that's so powerful.
It is. And she says, I hope you don't repeat my mistakes, but she's also scared that Phoenix will.
Yeah.
And then Phoenix is like, just go away.
Oh, no.
And now it's just like this raw outpouring of pain.
Yeah.
And it's like a reminder that even though she was trying to protect her kids, they were still deeply affected.
It's a hard truth.
It is. Okay. So then there's this theme of like the pressure to keep up appearances.
Oh, yeah.
And how she felt this constant need to like perform and fulfill her work obligations.
Right.
Even when she was going through all this stuff.
Yeah, like even after the overdose, the X Factor was still looming.
Yeah, and they quickly arranged for Talisa Kontostavlos to cover for her.
It just shows you like the demands of the industry.
It does, yeah. And then she realizes that she's basically alone.
Oh, no.
Like her support system is just her security, her hairdresser, and her publicist. And even her Spice Girls bandmates are like reaching out.
Yeah.
And she can't even connect with them.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, and she talks about this huge diamond ring that she was so proud of.
Yeah.
But she had actually bought it herself.
Oh, wow.
And it becomes like this symbol of her misery.
It's like this outward sign of success that's actually a sign of unhappiness.
Exactly. Okay, so then she decides to go on the X Factor, even though she's like super sick.
What?
Yeah, she's in intensive care with liver and kidney damage.
Oh, my God.
And the doctor is like, you are not leaving.
Right.
And she's like, I have to.
Oh, wow.
I know. And then she discharges herself against medical advice.
Talk about determination.
I know. And she's in so much pain, but she just like covers it up with makeup.
Oh, yeah.
And she's like, I just have to focus. I can't answer any questions.
That's intense.
It is. And then she watches this TED Talk by Leslie Morgan Steiner.
Oh, yeah.
Who talks about her experience with domestic violence.
Yeah.
And she has this moment where she's like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone.
It's so powerful to see yourself reflected in someone else's story.
It is. And at first she didn't even want to watch the video.
Yeah.
But her friend was like, you have to watch this.
Right.
And then she finally does. And she's like, wow.
That's like a light bulb moment.
It is. And so then she realizes that she made a mistake by talking to the police.
Oh.
And she's like, my priority is getting Madison back.
Her daughter.
Yeah. And she decides to just file a missing child report and let her lawyers deal with everything else.
Yeah.
And it's like this shift in focus.
It is. It's like she's taking back control.
Yeah. And she starts remembering like the early days of the Spice Girls.
Oh, yeah?
And how different it was from like the private jets and the fame.
Yeah.
And her dad was always like, don't waste your money, Melanie.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like this reminder of her roots.
Yeah.
So then she goes back to her husband and he's like, you fool.
Oh, my God.
I know. And she's like, I didn't go back because I loved him.
Right.
She went back because she was afraid of losing her kids.
Yeah.
And she talks about how Dr. Sophie kind of reinforced that fear.
Oh, wow.
And it's like her ex-husband had manipulated even that.
Yeah. It's crazy how abusers can manipulate everyone around them.
It is, yeah. And she talks about the grief of losing her father.
Yeah.
And how she keeps repeating these unhealthy relationship patterns.
Oh, yeah. She says she defaulted to the oldest scars on her heart.
I know. It's like she keeps going back to what's familiar.
Yeah. Even if it's bad for her.
Yeah. Okay, so then she talks about her family history and her dad's roots in Nevis.
Yeah.
And how it's this island with this history of resilience in the face of slavery.
Wow.
Yeah, and she connects her ancestry to these like strong survivors.
Yeah, she's drawing strengths from her heritage.
She is, and she talks about her family's achievements in Nevis.
Yeah.
And then the challenges they faced when they immigrated to England.
Oh, yeah.
And the racism they experienced.
It's a powerful reminder of the struggles that people face.
It is, yeah. And she talks about her great-grandmother, Celian.
Oh, yeah.
Who was this like really vibrant figure. Yeah. And then the awkward reactions of her white grandparents to her black father.
Yeah.
And the racism they experienced in Leeds in the 70s.
Yeah.
It's like this whole complex mix of culture and history.
Yeah. And she talks about her own experiences of navigating her mixed heritage.
Yeah, exactly. And then there are these like little moments from her childhood, like hiding spaghetti bolognese from her dad when he was watching TV.
Oh, yeah.
And it kind of shows like the strictness of her upbringing.
Yeah, it gives you a glimpse into her family dynamics.
Yeah, and then she talks about meeting Joan Collins.
Oh, wow.
And how it was like this special moment for her dad.
Yeah.
Because he was such a fan.
Right.
But he wasn't really impressed by like the flash of her celebrity lifestyle.
Yeah, he had different values.
Yeah, and she talks about her fear of her dad's punishments.
Yeah.
And how they didn't really talk about their feelings.
Right.
And she makes this connection to her dad's relationship with his own mom.
It's like this pattern of emotional distance.
Yeah, and then there was this big silence around her teenage overdose.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and she talks about her dad's flaws.
Yeah.
Like how he was flirtatious.
Right.
And she has this memory of seeing her mom with a bloody face.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, after an argument with her dad.
It's like she's acknowledging the complexities of their family.
She is, yeah. And then she talks about how her dad didn't want her to be a dancer.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And he was super embarrassed when he saw her perform in Blackpool.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah, and she really wanted to make him proud.
That's so relatable.
It is. And so she talks about how she became this dancing queen.
Yeah.
And she remembers her early dance training.
Yeah.
And her time at the Horseshoe Bar in Blackpool.
Yeah.
And then she makes this connection to her blue catsuit on America's Got Talent.
It's like a symbol of her journey.
It is, yeah. And then she talks about visiting Chic's house with Victoria Beckham.
Oh, God.
And how Chic was like lovely but also controlling, and
Mhm.
she had these like outdated views on women.
It's like an early glimpse into the kind of control that she would later experience.
Yeah, exactly. And then she talks about her approach to body image and
Yeah.
how she's like very pragmatic about it.
Right.
But then she also talks about the complexities of living with her skin color
Yeah.
and how that's been a lifelong journey.
Right.
And then she remembers feeling homesick when she was dancing in Blackpool
Oh, yeah.
and her relationship with Stephen Mulrain.
Okay.
And she talks about all the tough lessons she learned about show business.
Yeah.
Like the separation from loved ones and the long hours and the judgment.
Right.
And she had to learn to be really self-focused.
Yeah.
And she even experienced jealousy and sabotage from other dancers.
Wow.
Yeah, but she persevered.
That's resilience.
It is. And then she went to the Northern School of Contemporary Dance, but she was bored.
Oh.
Yeah, and then she started teaching aerobics at the Mandela Center.
Okay.
And she was like really good at it.
Oh.
And then she met Eddie Murphy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and she describes it as like a movie moment.
Yeah.
And it's like this instant connection.
It sounds like a real turning point.
It was. And she talks about how she was super awkward and she ran away.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and then her friend Lisa was like, "What are you doing?" And she gave her a second chance.
Okay.
And she was still really awkward.
Ah.
But the attraction was there.
Yeah.
And then she talks about the Spice Girls and how they were like kind of scrappy in the beginning.
Yeah.
And Jerry was like determined to find a manager.
Right.
And they went up to Simon Fuller in a car park.
Oh, wow.
I know, and he rejected them.
Oh, no.
But they didn't give up.
That's amazing.
It is, yeah, and she talks about wanting to connect with their fans on a personal level.
Yeah.
And how that was really important to her.
Right.
And then she says that Eddie Murphy was one of the first people who really saw her, like beyond Scary Spice.
Yeah.
And they would talk about their families and her childhood in Leeds.
It sounds like they were really trying to get to know each other.
And she insisted on like going out into the real world with him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like she took him to Coffee Bean.
I love that.
I know, and he was like super germophobic.
Oh, yeah.
She was like, whatever.
Yeah.
And then she talks about meeting Janet Jackson at his house.
Oh, wow.
And how she was like trying to make it less awkward.
Yeah.
And then Eddie proposed to her and wanted to have a baby.
Wow.
Yeah, but then later their relationship was like downplayed in the media.
It's like they were trying to erase their history.
Yeah, and then she talks about their shared sense of humor.
Oh, yeah.
And how he was really nervous about meeting her dad.
Uh,
Yeah, and he tried to impress him.
That's cute.
It is. And they had these movie nights.
Oh, yeah.
And Eddie was interested in Black American culture.
Okay.
So she would like ask her friends for movie recommendations.
That's awesome.
It is. And then she wanted to buy a house together in Trancas Canyon.
Oh, yeah.
But he said no.
Oh.
And she started to feel like she was being sucked into his world. And she needed to spend time with her own friends.
Okay.
And it's like the beginning of the end.
It sounds like it, yeah.
Yeah, and then she goes back to Leeds.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she just like needed to go home.
Yeah.
And Eddie kept calling her mom, trying to get her to come back.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and her mom was like, maybe you should go back.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and she was like, no, I'm not going back.
Yep.
And then she has all these like memories of the Spice Girls and Eddie.
Yeah.
And it's like this whirlwind of emotions.
It sounds like a really intense time.
It was. And then when they broke up, she faced this like huge backlash.
Oh, yeah.
She calls it a tidal wave of vitriol.
Wow.
Yeah, and she talks about how it was so different from the adoration she got as a Spice Girl. And she was like so anxious about facing the other mothers at her kids' school.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, and then she talks about shame
Okay.
and how it's used to control women.
Yeah.
And she described all the conflicting emotions of her court case
Okay.
and how she felt like she was being silenced,
Right.
but she refused to be ashamed.
Good for her.
Yeah. And then her daughter Angel is born,
Okay.
and it's on Eddie Murphy's birthday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and she was like, I really hope she comes before midnight.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, and Eddie wasn't there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and she still loved him.
Even after everything.
Yeah, and she thinks his pride was preventing him from reaching out.
Yeah.
And then Stephen comes into the picture,
Okay.
and her friend Janet recognizes his last name.
Oh, yeah.
And she's like, oh my gosh, your husband is related to Harry Belafonte.
Wow.
Yeah, and Melanie had no idea.
That's crazy.
It is. And then she talks about how Stephen was really flattering,
Yeah.
and he tried to isolate her from her mom.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and her mom was like, I don't trust this guy.
Right.
But Melanie was like, no, I got this.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, and then they got married in Vegas.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like a tiny chapel with like 2 witnesses.
That's so quick.
It was, and then she talks about how she had this pattern
Yeah.
of like rushing into relationships. And she was engaged to this guy, Jim,
Yeah.
and he reminded her of her dad.
Oh,
Yeah, and her friends, Mel C and Charlotte, were like, this guy is bad news.
wow.
Yeah, and her mom was like, he's just using you.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and then there were problems in their